foreign exchange which would be utilized in these loans. So that was also an option which was available to the government. But I wonder why they did not do it. Is it because after taking the haircut and defaulting on the debt repayments on the local market, that the appetite has not yet returned in the local market for government paper? They may get up and say, well, yes, we put up government paper and it's being taken up, because obviously there are certain businesses in this country, the banks, the insurance companies, the credit unions, they do have to invest a portion of their earnings in government paper. But we want to know what is the appetite by the average Barbadian who, before 2018, when the government defaulted and caused persons to take a haircut in bonds, savings bonds, and all of the government paper, you had a large catchment of Barbadians who would look to opportunities to invest in savings bonds and other government paper in order to augment their pension at retirement, or as a way of getting additional interest above and beyond the interest which was normally paid at the bank, because in some instances you don't get any interest at the bank. You also have to ask the question too, how much interest is the government earning from keeping such high debt foreign exchange cover? The interest that the government is earning on the foreign exchange compared to utilizing a local loan and utilizing some of that foreign exchange for the time being. These are things that could have been done, but it seems sometimes that this government only knows one play, and that play is to borrow our way. Borrow money is almost like the song that you had years ago, and this is the crop over season in which that is done. Bring drink, somebody will pay. Because this government seems to have the mentality, borrow the money, somebody else will have to pay, and not make any necessary provision as to how that money will be repaid. Now, Mr. President, they may give you the impression that I am just making up all of this information, but I want to come with facts from the central bank reports, which, especially one which was recently issued, which shows that as much as the Barbados Labour Party government and persons such as Senator Reid will try to give the impression that this economy is booming and all is well in this country, it is not so. In fact, one would ask the question, for 154 days in the ministry, what really has Senator Reid accomplished other than being able to come and tell us today that we should be able to have our driver's license renewed automatically? Right now, that is something that should have been done ever since this government had a Ministry of Innovation, and every single project under the Ministry of Innovation since 2018 has failed. And I will just repeat them because all of them resulted in monies which were borrowed and money which was wasted. Because you had to borrow money or find money. Let's go to licensing authority. You had the stickers for the driver's license. And you had that started in 2018. This is something that I agreed with. I actually liked it because you could see by the color of the sticker whether or not, even if you were not collecting road tax any longer, but if the insurance on the vehicle was up to date. That was a project started under this government, came to an end, no explanation as to why it ended. Then they had persons go and put the tags on the vehicles. We don't know to this day if those tags are working. And again, a project which was funded by this government, possibly by borrowed money, abandoned, and we don't know how much was spent, and we don't know the reasons why it was spent. So I'm just showing to Senator Reid, these are some of the things that in his ministry that he has the capacity to rectify. and to bring reports to the people of Barbados so that we can have a better understanding, other than the fact that you recognize after 154 days that it should be easier for Barbadians to renew their driver's license. We want more than that from a government which claims to be so competent and so A-class and on top of their game and everything, that to come here after 154 days to say to Barbadians, yes, you should be able to easier renew your driver's license. We've been saying that for the longest while, and your Ministry of Innovation had promised that since 7 years ago. But yet still it is not happening. And I'm not done with the litany of projects. There's the Trident ID card under the same ministry as well. Started and abandoned. At one time they forced all Barbadians to get it, saying it was mandatory. Then the minister was changed because he was doing nonsense. I guess that they changed him. I don't know, Mr. President. That's a possibility. The ministry was changed, and then you heard from a more competent minister, okay, you can use both. You can use the Trident ID card and you can use the regular blue ID card. Again, money which was wasted. Money which was wasted. Again, Mr. President, money which was wasted in terms of the whole project of the Trident ID cards, wasting time of Barbadians who had to line up outside of the different agency, wasting their lunch hour, wasting their business day in order to get the cards, and then to tell Barbadians, well, you no longer need to rush to get the card. The regular blue ID card would work just the same. So all of these are projects which this government started and then abandoned. And Barbadians might think that there's no cost associated to this, but we really need to inquire who is the middleman, the consultant who was paid to develop the project, the middleman who provided the resources, possibly the ID card, the printing machine, the persons who benefited also from the additional largesse coming out from the government. All of these are things that we have to consider, and for that reason, that is why Barbadians are concerned that the money being borrowed by this government is not being spent in the best interest of the people of Barbados. That is the overall concern. We could even come to part of it deal with road infrastructure. You have roads that are milled and paved, and when the rain starts to fall, potholes back in them again. What is the purpose of that? You mill and pave a road overnight, left it flat for the rainwater to settle on the roads. Then when you have a heavy downpour of rain, in less than 2 months, some of those same mill and paved roads are in potholes again and would again need to be resurfaced. You have a situation where some roads which were milled and paved when they first came in 2018 receive a job again in less than 7 years. So we are only building roads that can last for 3 to 5 years, or not, well, in this situation, not even a year, because in less than a year, it needs repaving. Good example, take a look at the road at Highway from the Warrens roundabout by the Sol gas station going up the hill towards University. That was one of the first projects being done by this government. And when you come down that hill, there is a crater that if you are not careful, it will take you to China. On that very said road, Mr. President, that is a road which was done by this government in less than 7 years, and it has proven not to be lasting. So is the money being spent adequately to finance developmental projects for this country? And again, when we look at developmental projects, Mr. President, developmental projects, part of this loan deals with housing. Right now, the housing situation in Barbados is in a crisis. You have persons being faced with the ridiculous prospect of paying over $250 to rent a room in a shared house where they share toilet and bath facilities and kitchen and all other things with other persons. $250. At one point that was $100 a week or $150. No, in some cases it's $250, almost $300 a week. That shows that the housing market in this country is in crisis. Has this government, I will just ask to be kind, because I already know the answer, has this government invested in any significant rental housing projects in this country that would be of some assistance to some of those people, and especially mainly young people or mainly single parents, mothers who are trying to look for some way to raise their children? This government has not invested significantly in any major housing project in this country that could bring a dent to such a reckless situation where Barbadians are forced to pay over $300 a week just to rent a room in a house, sharing a toilet and a bath and kitchen facilities with someone. And this government wants to get on a platform and give people the impression that they're doing an excellent job. You have not been doing an excellent job. That is why Barbadians are concerned about where all the money that is being borrowed is going. If they could see the performance, they would not be concerned. Because if you can see where the money is going, you would not be concerned about the level of borrowing. But we are at this stage where we are not saying where the money is going, but every time the Prime Minister leaves the country, she comes back with another loan. And we are unable to say it many times because it's important. It's important and a salient fact, Mr. President. This senator here may not be engaging with the people of Barbados, but I do. And when I speak to the constituents in St. Michael Central, these are the things that I hear. When our Democratic Labour Party, when we go out and we speak to people, these are the concerns that we are hearing. They're concerned that money is being borrowed, they're not seeing how it is being spent, and they're not certain that we will have the capacity to repay it when the lenders come a-calling. And they're also concerned that it could impact on our dollar facing the consequence of being devalued. We really don't want to spend a very prolonged period of time in an IMF program as Jamaica did. We would like to get out of the IMF hand and move on with programs to develop this country. All of these are things that we are concerned about, sir. Now, I mentioned the central bank report. To show that we are not able to repay our loans, Mr. President, there are some metrics within that central bank report which I find to be quite alarming.
So, which report are you referring to?
The review of the Barbados economic performance, January to June 2025.
Thank you very much.
The most recent central bank report, I think it was only delivered last Friday, so if the Honourable Senators on the other side did not have a chance to read it, I can make, well, the copy is available for them that they can download, Mr. President. But in looking at that report, Mr. President, it shows that the external debt service to current account credit has increased. And that, Mr. President, is something that you don't just look at debt to GDP, but the external debt to service to current account has increased from 3.5 in 2019. We are now at 9.6 in 2024. And for June 2024, it was 9.1, but astonishingly for June 2025, 34.9, which possibly deals with the loan, which the debt which was recently acquired of the 8.5%, and some of that being used to repay the IMF debt. But those figures are alarming, Mr. President, because it shows that the country is not earning sufficient from current revenue to pay for its external debt. That is one of the significant things in the increase in that ratio, Mr. President. And then there are other factors which we need to look at. Don't just look at the debt to GDP, because we know how the debt to GDP has fallen significantly. So, but you need to look at our interest payments. Now, the interest payments has increased from 249.7 million in 2019 to a whopping 749.9 million in 2024 based on from this report. That is a significant increase in interest payments, Mr. President. And if you are paying that much in interest, it means that you have very little left to do capital works projects, and you have very little left for other goods and services, because you've increased from 249.7 million in 2019, and now we are at 749.9 million in 2024. And based on the projection, it will be could very well be 800 million or more at the end of this financial year for 2025, Mr. President. Those are things which you need to look at. And then when you look at the performance of the economy, Mr. President, I mentioned we are concerned that we are not earning enough to pay for these loans. When you look at the sectors, our revenue earning sectors have declined overall since 2019. They have, in some cases, they are now struggling to reach the 2019 targets, and in other cases, they have dropped significantly below the 2019 targets. Look at tourism, Mr. President. The GDP by sector and activity, tourism in 2019 was 736.2 million. In 2024, Mr. President, at the time when, in 2024, Mr. President, at the time when the world had already recovered from COVID, Barbados was still lagging behind at 703.9 million, Mr. President. We should be able to do better than that. So this is one indicator that shows that this country is not earning enough foreign exchange to pay back for these foreign loans, which the Prime Minister brings back to the country whenever she leaves. I've said it for a fourth time, Senator Nichols, so you don't need to, through you, Mr. President, just let Senator Nichols know that I've said it for a fourth time. So, and then when we look at other productive sectors, Mr. President, such as agriculture, in 2019, Mr. President, we earned 264.9 million from the agricultural sector. In 2024, a measly 196.6 million from the agricultural sector. So this government, for all the time that they have been in office, have abandoned agriculture in this country. And that is why, and we are feeling it in terms of the impact on the cost of living and in this country. That's why you have, in Barbados, you pay over $8 sometimes a pound for yam, over $4 a pound for sweet potatoes in some instances. You have a crisis now in the poultry sector. You also have a crisis in crisis in poultry and crisis with the pork industry, because at one point in time we were resilient in terms of our production of pork in Barbados, at least, but now you have a situation where this government has opened up the floodgates and allowed persons to import pork, and the pork is being sold almost at the same price and basically cutting out local farmers. That does not show that this government has any intention of doing anything for agriculture in this country. And all of these are things that need to be shored up if the country is to be in a situation where it can pay back for these loans. We must increase the performance and the level of activity in our productive sectors. We must help our small business people. We must help our farmers. Do not just put all of the assistance into the hands of the big business and tourism. A lot of assistance have gone the way of tourism, but we are seeing diminishing returns from the tourism sector because it has not yet caught up in terms of its contribution prior to 2019. Manufacturing, Mr. President, is also another weak area. In 2019, the contribution was $627.7 million, and in 2024, a little boost of $651.6 million. But again, Mr. President, more can be done to shore up manufacturing. So yes, there's been a little boost, mostly coming from possibly the rum industry, but more can be done. And then this fallacy that there's a building boom in this country. Yes, there's a building boom. We see places being constructed, but then when we look at who's actually employed in the construction, many of them are not Barbadians. Quite frankly, you have to get an interpreter when you go on the sites. So that impacts the labor market in this country. Many of them are not Barbadian, and a lot of that money will not be staying into the Barbados and going into the communities to help to finance households. But you have a mining and quarrying industry which is down in comparison to what it was in 2019, but you have other sectors which have been increasing. So overall, Mr. President, if you look at don't just listen to the sweet talk coming from the government, but you need to dissect and analyze the figures, and you will find that they will give you the impression with the sweet talk that everything is fine and dandy and rosy in this country. But when you look at the figures say a completely different story. When you go on the ground in this country, Barbadians feel a completely different story and a completely different impact in terms of their wallet and in terms of their quality of life and in terms of the disposable income which they have. You can imagine that a government who is buoyant and boasting could only take a cent off of gas, and Barbados is paying the highest for gasoline all over the world compared to other countries. All of these impact on the productivity of the country and the competitiveness of the country. Maybe the government might need to consider removing some of the taxes off of the tourism industry, and perhaps that would make it more competitive, because you're hearing the tourists saying constantly Barbados is becoming far too expensive for them to travel to. And everywhere people are looking for a bargain. And perhaps that is one of the reasons why this economy has not rebounded in the way how it should, because the government is taxing its way out of this recession and taxing Barbadians at every turn. You have a high cost of living, and it impacts even on the cultural sector in this country. You have a dismal performing crop over season, Mr. President. So we could possibly stay here till 9, 10 o'clock tonight, and it will not make a difference to the crop over season, because it is not that impactful, because people have no money to spend. And they're not really engaging in the activities in that way, Mr. President. And there's also the crime situation as well, which have persons staying at home.
Honourable members, there's too much buzz, please. Press outside the author.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, in terms of what these funds will be utilized for, I am hoping that after borrowing this money, that we will see a significant improvement in the quality of health care delivery, especially at our polyclinics. Now, I know that this government has pushed that trying to get persons to utilize the polyclinics as opposed to going to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, accident and emergency. Now, it's okay to tell them to do this, but when they go to the polyclinic setting, you must have the diagnostic tools available that they can get a similar service. So don't rush them to the polyclinic and they need an x-ray, and the polyclinics tell them, well, you have to go back to QEH. Don't rush them to the polyclinics and they need a simple thing as an ultrasound, and that capacity is not available at the polyclinic. So I'm hoping that all of these things will be included to outfit all of our polyclinics, or as many of the polyclinics in the large catchment area, in particular the Morris Bayer Polyclinic, the St. John Polyclinic, which should be used for what it was actually built for, and the St. Vincent's Cock Polyclinic, and Brantford Tate Polyclinic as well, so that yes, when you are sending persons away from accident and emergency, that they can receive the appropriate diagnostic care which is necessary at the polyclinics, that the polyclinics will not have to refer them back to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. So I'm hoping that out of these funds that you will see the diagnostic equipment such as x-rays where necessary, and also ultrasounds, the ability to do some blood tests in the polyclinic setting, so that when the doctor sees a patient, that they will be able to get a full profile of that individual and treat and discharge that patient from out of the polyclinic setting, that they will not have to become a burden on the Queen Elizabeth Hospital accident and emergency. You also need to increase the capacity within these clinics as well. Oftentimes, most days, there's only one doctor working in the clinic who has to see regular appointments and walk-ins. So you need to increase the capacity, the number of physicians who work within the polyclinic setting, that you will have a shorter wait time, and that even if persons walk in, that they will be seen faster. And doctors also need to have the capacity to spend a little bit more time in terms of with the patients to actually get a better idea of their profile. So you need to reduce the burden on those employees, doctors and nurses within the polyclinic setting. So I'm hoping that these funds would help to alleviate some of those bottleneck challenges within the sector. There are other areas too, Mr. President, which I could mention, but I would want to speak to the infrastructure projects. We need to have serious housing projects, especially within the urban corridor of Barbados. We need to have projects which will bring back persons and business to Bridgetown, because Bridgetown has become a ghost city, especially not just at night, but some days you travel through Bridgetown is almost like a sleeping city. So that could only be rectified if you bring adequate housing projects within the Bridgetown environment as well. These are things which need to be done, Mr. President. This government has borrowed in one go $1 billion in the last sitting that we had, and we cannot see where it is being utilized. We cannot see the housing projects across Barbados that will take Barbadians, give them reasonable accommodation for purchase or for rental. The government needs to intervene in the housing market in that way to bring back some sort of justice within the housing market in this country, and to give opportunity for the many young people and for the many families out there who are looking for adequate housing. These are things that we need to see happening with the funds from this project, Mr. President. Mr. President, after reviewing all of these outcomes and the fact that there is great concern in this country about whether or not this country would have the capacity in the next 20 years on the trajectory which it is on, being led by the Barbados Labour Party, to actually pay back these loans and to actually earn significant foreign exchange to pay back these loans, we cannot support yet another foreign borrowing by this government. Yes, we would support in terms of the improvements to the health care and to the infrastructure. We would say that the money could be raised on the local market. I would suggest that the government explore that option in terms of raising the money on the local market to get these projects done. But we can also say that they have borrowed so much money over the last few years that we have not seen the performance of those loans in this country. And for that reason, Mr. President, we cannot support this loan agreement.
Thank you very much, Senator Laurel. Senator Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I am going to come back to Senator Worrell in a few moments, but I'm going to start with the specifics of the bill for the benefit of the public and for the benefit of those who may have heard Senator Worrell's intervention. Now, Mr. President, these two orders on the order paper 8 and 9 speak to two very specific loans. They capture, Mr. President, in the first instance, $34.2 million for an urban renewal project in the water, housing, and infrastructure sector, and a second facility, Mr. President, amounting to $58.5 million for a polyclinic upgrade and refurbishment of the primary health care system. These are the items captured at orders number 8, and orders are number 8 and 9. As said by my colleague, Senator Reid, in his introduction of the bills, they were navigated by the officials at the Ministry with responsibility for Economic Affairs and Investment, the Ministry with responsibility for Finance, the Ministry with responsibility as well for Infrastructure under the Prime Minister's Office, and the Ministry of Health. But it also had the benefit of the input of the Central Bank, the broader finance team, and the Public Investment Unit. And so while there is a certain ease with which non-technicians may say, well, why not do this and why do this? I have the confidence that the specialist technicians who have expertise and results under their belt, who have actually designed all of our instruments, starting from the calamitous financial situation which the government found itself in by the same Democratic Labour Party that Senator Worrell referred to in 2018, that the government's team that has led this country since then till now is far more competent than anybody on the other side who led us into the scenario that we had to unravel. So I want to start there, Mr. President, with acknowledging that team, as did my colleague, Senator Reid. Now, in the first project, Mr. President, which is the urban renewal project in the water, housing, and infrastructure sector, there are a number of objectives for the project that I want the public to be aware of. One, early this morning when I was reading the newspaper, I saw a former member of the Democratic Labour Party government prior to 2018 making reference to the phrase that many of us know, Barbados is more than an economy, it is also a society. I've already outlined, Mr. President, that the Barbados Labour Party government, with its technical team, skilled and gifted in finance and economic affairs, have unraveled the mess left behind by Senator Worrell's party. But similarly, Mr. President, we are in agreement that we are a society, and it is for that reason that this loan before us is appropriate. This loan, focusing on society and buttressed by a strong economy, focuses on improving and revitalizing housing and neighborhood conditions in low and moderate income communities, specifically in the Bridgetown area. These are densely populated communities in many instances that have not had a renewal project in decades. Who has delivered a renewal project to the city of Bridgetown? The Barbados Labour Party, because it is a society, is delivering a renewal project to the city of Bridgetown. In addition, it is meant to contribute to providing additional affordable housing solutions for persons in that category, low and moderate income families, and, Mr. President, to strengthen the institutional capacity of agencies involved in housing provision and neighborhood revitalization. Now, Mr. President, there are a number of specific things that are meant to be undertaken under the loan, this particular loan, and I want to get into them. The first phase focuses on the development of neighborhoods, specifically relating to upgrading the existing low and moderate income communities, providing them with appropriate infrastructure and social facilities in the following areas: Chapman Lane and its suburbs, the areas which lie between President Kennedy Road, Westbury Road, Baxter's Road, Tudor Street, Princess Alice Highway, and Prescott Boulevard neighborhood. These are divided, Mr. President, into a number of sections. In the first instance, a residential housing development. They're also meant a long-standing issue that has plagued these particular communities in the urban area, in the Bridgetown area, the need for construction to the sewage treatment plant in the Bridgetown area, which they have lived adjacent to and have not been connected to. This Barbados Labour Party government, Mr. President, because we believe in a society and not just talk about it, is under this particular loan arrangement ensuring that those persons once and for all are connected to the sewage plant that they live next door to. We're also, Mr. President, constructing sewage tanks and connecting them to the local sewage system, upgrading the houses and retrofitting them to withstand hurricanes and other climate adaptation solutions. In many instances, Mr. President, from 2018, this government, when we first came to office, spoke about a pit toilet eradication program. In many of these urban areas, there are persons who have benefited because they own the land, and in other instances, they're still navigating outdoor toilets. This project is meant to facilitate the building as well of sanitary facilities, including bathrooms, to those facilities in the Bridgetown area. Installing personal water tanks, including with small pumps and batteries in the event of power outages, in particular after a climate event. There's also meant to be a number of community upgrades, and it includes an area that falls under my remit, extending the natural gas networks and connections in those areas. It will also include things like paving sidewalks, expanding roads, including investments in the sewage system, providing flood protection, renewable energy and energy efficiency initiatives, lighting, street lighting, and water distribution projects. There's also meant to be the resurfacing of deteriorated asphalt roads and improving streets to include pedestrian and emergency vehicle access, as well as waste collection. If you have driven through many of these urban areas in recent times, it is very difficult because these roads are narrow, and we want to make sure that in the event that something goes wrong, you need to have emergency access, whether it is by an ambulance or by a fire truck, that they're able to have access. And so they're making sure that there is provision, especially given in some instances we have seen where there are fires or emergencies that take place in these areas. You hear members of the community raising concern about the inability of emergency vehicles to get into the communities. We want to be able, as a government, to address that. And then, Mr. President, who says that people who live in upscale or middle income housing communities are the only ones who want community recreational facilities? Low and moderate income households also want community recreational facilities, and it is intended under this project that exactly that will happen. There's a resilience agenda, Mr. President, and under the Electricity Supply Act, certainly under my own ministry, a new piece of pioneering legislation which we introduced into this honourable chamber a year ago, there is now a requirement for utility lines, specifically electricity lines, to be underground, so that in the event of a climate disaster, that you are able to recover more quickly than if they were above ground. This project, Mr. President, has included within it a climate resilient component which requires the relocating of water, sewage, and electricity lines from overhead to underground. This is what we call a renewal project for the city of Bridgetown, the communities that live in the Bridgetown area and are deserving of being treated as though they have access to the same kinds of facilities that everyone else does. Now, the second project, Mr. President, under order number 9, is specifically a polyclinic upgrade and the refurbishment of the primary healthcare system. There are a couple of objectives, and I want to focus on what they are. In the first instance, the Senator Honourable spoke about it, a polyclinic upgrade and the refurbishment of the primary healthcare system overall. It is meant, Mr. President, to look at developing healthcare centers, ensuring that we can provide the quality healthcare services that Senator Honourable and average Barbadians are talking about that they deserve. This is very much one of the things that we want to be able to do, leading in reducing disease, disability and mortality rates. And so the project is meant to focus on providing citizen access to all of these centers. And how are they meant to do that? By one, constructing 2 new purpose-built facilities for the provision of primary care services, modernizing and upgrading specific polyclinics, and upgrading point of care and other equipment at about 9 polyclinics. And I want to list what those ones are, Mr. President. In the first instance, the expectation under the project, which has been thoroughly scoped over the last year, is to focus on the construction of 2 new specialized primary care clinics with external parking for both clinics at the Eunice Gibson Polyclinic and the Randall Phillips Polyclinic. For refurbishment, Mr. President, we expect that the following polyclinics, including additional parking spaces, will be refurbished. The Winston Scott Polyclinic, the Maurice Bayer Polyclinic, the St. Philip Polyclinic, Frederick Miller Polyclinic, Edgar Cochrane Polyclinic, Branford Tate Polyclinic, and yes, also the St. John Polyclinic mentioned by Senator Worrell, otherwise known as the David Thompson Health and Social Services Complex. All of those are meant to undergo refurbishments. But they're not stopping there, Mr. President. The clinics are meant to have a number of specialist services made available to them. So there will be general clinics, specialized clinics, maternal and child health clinics, sexual health clinics, support clinics, and emergency clinics for the benefit of the communities that they live. And the intention, Mr. President, is that all of these polyclinics, the 9 for refurbishment and the new ones, so bringing it to 11, will have upgraded, modern, necessary medical equipment and furniture for the facilities to make sure that they're able to function. Now, the project is meant to last for a period of 4 years, and the loan makes provision for an additional year of closeout. This is in terms of the execution of the project. The loan itself will be repayable over a period of 20 years on principal and interest, with a grace period of 5 years. The interest will be that 3.5%, yes, per annum. And both loans, as has been done in every single instrument that Barbados has undertaken since 2018, will include the well talked about natural disaster clauses that allow for us to pause in the event of. Now, I want to come back to Senator Worrell's comments on whether or not the government is borrowing too much, what it is using it for. I've already made it very clear that the services that the public of Barbados may say on the ground to all of us, not just the Democratic Labour Party leader, the opposition here in the state, in the Honourable Chamber, but they say to all of us, the services that people say that they need, they hold one body accountable, this government. We are held accountable for delivering on those services. Whether those services are provided by way of the government servicing debt over time and being able, people are looking for delivery. But I want to get into that. And I want to make the following statement. Our international borrowing is strategic. It is not excessive. And I want to say why. Here is why. I want to say why. The computer is picking up the call. My phone is silent, but the computer is showing it. We were in this chamber, Mr. President, a few weeks back. And we did had a fiscal bill that we were navigating. In June of 2025, I believe it was the issuance of $500 million. Now, this was carefully timed to allow us to return to the international capital markets. At that time, we spoke about the last time we went to the capital markets, which was in 2006, 2007, somewhere thereabouts. And now we have seen Barbados' successful 2018 debt restructuring. And I probably may get to 4 times with repetition myself, but the disastrous 10 years of financial and economic management of the Democratic Labour Party, which was undertaken by the Barbados Labour Party when we came to government in 2018, had to be restructured, and it was done successfully. If there is a doubt in anyone's mind about that, go back to the numbers. The same central bank reports will show that. So after we successfully looked at debt restructuring and have had years of sound fiscal management, we went back to the international markets in June 2025. This issuance, we have said here in this chamber, replaced what would have been an instrument under the Eurobond that would have matured in 2029. We undertook, Mr. President, to begin to prepay that loan, and we smoothed our debt profile, and we created over $300 million in fiscal space through the year 2030. In addition, Unlike the previous instrument, this one also carried the contingent clauses that I just spoke about, allowing for deferrals in the event of natural disasters or pandemics. This is a resilience measure. And so, yes, we undertook that. The government, however, is balancing how it goes to the market domestically and locally. But to say that there is no domestic finance raising is also a misrepresentation. Over $200 million in new BOSS bonds, Mr. President, have been issued. BOSS bonds plus have been issued. A further $100 million domestic bond was launched in 2025. And as at the end of June 2025, Mr. President, we had also a number of investments, including in treasury bills, and we can see the BOSS Plus bonds bringing in around $27.7 million, mainly from domestic institutional investors, Mr. President, and not only the institutional investors, Mr. President, but householders are seen to remain the primary holders of these bonds. This is a testimony to the fact that there is robust confidence and robust participation in the domestic markets, despite what is being offered by the others on the other side. There is not an automatic move to only borrow on the international market, Mr. President. The intention of the fiscal managers is to ensure that our borrowing profile is designed to diversify our funding sources, to reduce our refinancing risk, and to extend our maturity profiles. It's not really meant to focus on one source over another. And so, Mr. President, despite all that we have heard from the other side, the reality of it is that despite all of their loud soundings about Barbados' debt, the debt to GDP ratio has fallen from where it was when they left office to just 102% to GDP, and our interest to revenue ratio has declined to 12.7%, and both of these have been found by our international partners to be indicators of a healthy debt profile. So, Mr. President, I want to address those things very quickly. I want to also ensure that we have a balance of why the government is doing both international and domestic borrowing. I want to make it clear that based on our international partners, our economy is doing well. Based on this loan, our society is also being positioned to thrive. And the final thing that I want to make clear in my contribution, Mr. President, is also the diversification of Barbados' bilateral and diplomatic relationships. Now, the Democratic Labour Party would wish to reduce the conversation to the Prime Minister going overseas and so on. But when did we see in any previous incarnation the range of international partners who are participating in Barbados in grant, in development, in technical assistance, and yes, in loans with a 3.5% interest rate? The Saudi Development Fund, and I remember quite well the first time the head of the Saudi Development Fund came to Barbados, and it was at the time, Mr. President, I remember it well because I went to Jamaica at the time with responsibility for tourism to have engagements with them. And so with the government of Saudi Arabia, they then came to Barbados subsequently, and they have maintained through the Minister of Finance of Saudi Arabia a strong relationship diplomatically with Barbados, and now a technical and a financial relationship with Barbados. And it is because they and others have seen these numbers, Mr. President. Barbados' external position improved in the first half of 2025. It was supported by a number of things, including, and I quote because this is the press release that was issued by the Central Bank of Barbados on the recently issued report. So the press release contained the following information. So whether it is our international bond partners, whether it is the World Bank, whether it is the international financial institutions, whether it is the ratings agencies, Mr. President, they are seeing these indicators. And in the report, Mr. President, it says this: tourism and the non-traded sector drove growth in the first half of the year. Output in the traded sector rose by 3.9%, as seen in gains in tourism and agriculture. I want to get into the specifics here, Mr. President. Tourism expanded in the first half of the year, boosted by strong demand by the United States, Long-stay arrivals increased by 3.3% in the first half of 2025. That was supported by additional airlift and targeted marketing across the source markets. Arrivals from the United States rose by 9.8%, contributing more than 90% of the overall increase. Stronger visitor demand, Mr. President, lifted occupancy. I'm quoting from the press release, Mr. President, issued by the Central Bank. Stronger visitor demand lifted occupancy across both hotels and the sharing economy, and during the first 6 months of the year, all of them saw increases. It also went on, Mr. President, to say cruise arrivals surged to a new high during the first 6 months of 2025. In transit cruise passengers, the details are there, Mr. President, that is there. I brought to this chamber, Mr. President, the foreign currency permits bill, which spoke about the growth of the global business sector. And in the press release, the Central Bank says this: foreign currency permit issuances rose slightly as new entities responded favorably to the revised foreign currency permits legislation. Authorities issued 1,227 foreign currency permits between the period under account, an increase of just under 1% compared to the same period in 2024. Now I could go on, but to suggest, Mr. President, that tourism is in decline is not factual. To suggest that other productive sectors are also not performing is also not factual. And then, Mr. President, on the labor economy, the report says this: the unemployment rate dropped to a record low during the first quarter of 2025. And I say a record low, Mr. President. At the end of March, the rate stood at 6.3%, down from 6.9% in the first quarter of 2024. A fall in persons, and it goes on to here, jobless, but it says the labor force expanded by 3,600 persons as fewer persons retired compared to the previous year. Mr. President, the resolution is before us. There are two resolutions, one on infrastructure in the Bridgetown and the urban areas, one on public health upgrades. I have spoken, Mr. President, on the performance of the society. I've spoken, Mr. President, on the performance of the economy, as people are asking for as well, and I've spoken on our debt profile. And I beg to move, Mr. President, that at this point, this resolution has a favorable consideration of our colleagues. My colleague will wrap up, and I know others will speak, but I support this resolution, and I am obliged to you.
Thank you, Senator Cummings. Senator Reverend Canon Dr. Rogers.
Thank you very much for recognizing me, Mr. President. I join my other colleagues in, she isn't in her chair right now, welcoming Senator Trim to the chamber. And as I've said before, sir, I have great confidence in the young people of Barbados. We have an education system that has nurtured them well, and I'm certainly looking forward to the presentations that will be given by Senator Trim in this chamber. So I came to this island in 1987, that's almost 40 years ago, and I've always felt, as I've mentioned in here before, that Barbados is one of the best societies in the world. I felt that we've had governments over the years, both administrations, some more successful than others, that have looked out for the betterment of the people and the development of this country. We have a very high standard of living, comparable to others in the region, and as a result of that, there'll be a necessity to borrow. I've heard of all kinds of loans from the time I've been on this island. When it wasn't a bullet loan, it was something else, and everybody keeps noise about every loan that is. But if we want to maintain the standard of living that we have, we understand that we have to borrow. And these resolutions before us reflect that tradition. The reason for the sums of money being borrowed are noble: to upgrade our polyclinic system, to maintain a high level of primary health care in our society, and also to upgrade our urban renewal projects, housing, water, infrastructure. These are all noble things and necessary things, sir, and for that reason I have no problem supporting these resolutions that are before us. My question would come on the other side, and I ask your permission, sir, to go a bit down the social line, as I always go from time to time. While I recognize the importance of these loans and I support the necessity of these loans to maintain the standard of living that we have and the standard of health care that we want to see in our country, as you heard from Senator Reid, it takes $5 billion to run the Barbados economy. I mean, we cannot generate all of that in 1 year through our productivity here. And so we need to borrow, trusting that the investment that we've made in our people and in our young people will then accrue to our benefit in years to come. And it is within that context, sir, that I want us to reflect upon these two resolutions that are before us, because my question would be, and as I support the resolutions, but my question, just to raise the question, who will repay these loans? Who will repay these loans? I had jotted on my piece of paper here, Barbados is more than an economy, it's a society. Seems as though somebody had a sneak peek at my paper. But those are words that were uttered by a former Prime Minister, the late David Thompson. And he was really raising the question to which Senator Cummins has responded, that because it's a society, we do these things and so on. But I want to look at it from another perspective today. We recognize it's a society and we recognize the need to procure these loans for the benefit and the building up of our society. But what if we are procuring the loans in one place, but the society is falling apart in another? And that's why I raised the question, who will repay these loans? I believe we're in the crop over season, so it was, I'm not referencing tech charge, I'm not referencing. In 1986, the Calypsonian, the red plastic bag, steps in Wilshire. He didn't enter the competition that year, but he sang a very interesting song, We Must Rebuild. We may have the biggest bank or the fanciest highway, but what if the people are getting worse every day? Yes, you know. You see. Senator Nichols sings in the cathedral choir, sir, and he's quoting some things. And we have to look at these resolutions within that context now, because in recent years, and I may sound like a stuck record on this, sir, but I believe it is worth repeating. Anecdotally, an old priest once saw a younger one in the vestry looking at some old papers. And the young priest was a little ashamed and said, "Sir, I'm dusting off an old one here." And the old priest said to him, "Son, the gospel has been around for over 2,000 years and we're still using it. So if your sermon is relevant, it is relevant." I believe that this particular angle that I want to speak about is relevant to these two resolutions when I ask who will repay these bills. Because one of the challenges that we're having in our society now, and in recent times, public figures have been referencing it, is the use of marijuana by our people. It is too prevalent in our society. And you know my angle on this, sir. I did not oppose the medicinal cannabis bill or the Sacramento bill when they came, but there was something that I begged us to do, and I'm still begging the government to pay attention to it. We have not set a threshold for the potency of cannabis on our streets, and that is where the danger comes. It is not about 14 grams or anything, it is about the potency of THC. In April of this year, our acting director of public prosecutions at the time, Alliston Seal, SC, made a link that the rising violence in our community is linked to marijuana use. That was his theory. He said, of the 1% of pre-sentence reports returned to my office, only 1% of them involved offenders who had never used cannabis. That means 99% of them are for people who have used cannabis. Likewise, only recently, I can't remember her name, a medical doctor from the QEH raised concerns about the exposure of unborn children to marijuana and the exposure of young children to marijuana. Our National Council on Substance Abuse has recently raised concerns about new psychoactive substances in Barbados, referencing synthetic cannabis. Now, and this is where it becomes technical, sir, and why I keep raising this. I have been very comfortable living under every administration in Barbados under which I've lived, because they are bright people whom the populace have elected, and they have technocrats alongside them who I believe do the best they can to lead this country. And we've heard this morning of the prowess of this particular administration, its capabilities and its competencies. And I agree with all of that. And what I want to appeal to, sir, these competent people, please set a threshold for the potency of THC on our streets. If we do not do that, all these loans that we are procuring now to build up our country, you're going to have a people who are not productive enough to repay them. What do I mean by this, sir? Who knows if there's Godfather OG on the streets of Barbados? There we go. Godfather OG is the strongest synthetic hybrid of cannabis there's been in terms of THC. It contains 34% THC. The legal limit that the US federal government has set for THC is 0.3. Do we have 34% on our streets? We do not know. Because granted, it is not supposed to come through our ports, but if it gets in, nobody regulates it. Because people have the ability to walk around with 14 grams of God knows what. Nobody knows what they're smoking. Not even the one smoking it. And so we need to set and crack down on this problem before we have an opioid crisis. Because as much as I support this development, we have to look at the society in general and ask ourselves, are we building up in one place and destroying in another? Just by negligence. Just by our refusal to do something that can put a cap on what is on our streets. Because if there are people out there that have access to things that are as many as 100 times percent what is considered a safe limit, what are we doing to our children? What are we doing to our people? And so I want to encourage us, I appeal. I am no technocrat. I just did a little reading on this. But talk to the people who know and ask them if it is not worthwhile to set a limit of the percentage of THC of cannabis that is on our streets. We look at the US. At the federal level, it is 0.3. That is why the CEO of the medicinal cannabis industry came out again in recent days talking about banks not listening. But banks are not going to listen to you. But the banks told you since 2019 what the problem was. It's right there in the legislation. It's right there in the Joint Select Committee's reports. So we have to make a decision as a country about what we're going to do with the young people that are in our care. I know some will say, but look at alcohol. Alcohol has a legal limit, you know. They recognized that a long time ago. There's a toxicity level for alcohol, and they set it. We normally, the guy, well, you wouldn't know, sir. I grew up in St. Kitts, and on a nice, clear day, you could see a little smoke coming from the mountains. And once you see smoke coming from the bush in the mountains, somebody was up there stilling something. The boys were stilling their hammering what you call moonshine. That's illegal. It was illegal. And we still have that here, that moonshine is illegal. And so the alcohol thresholds are set in the number of glasses of X, Y, or Z at this percentage and so on. What is the limit for THC in Barbados? We don't know. I don't want to say we don't care, because I know that this government is a caring one. I know, sir. I know that the legislation came because you were treating, and the NCSA said, what we're dealing with is not criminal, it's about rehab. And I agree, I understand that. But I still believe we need to set a limit of the potency of cannabis on our streets. If we fail to do that, everybody will be walking around smoking their 14 grams and nobody is touching them. But 14 grams of what? The police told me the other day, and this is anecdotal, sir, that fella's mixing in rat poison and all kinds of things now. And mixing up all kinds of things out there, but they can smoke 14 grams of something. 14 grams of what? And depending on the potency, if you smoke 14 grams for breakfast, and then you go and you have a mid-morning brunch of 14 grams, and then some for lunch, and a mid-afternoon snack, and then later in the evening you get a piece to cool down your head. But you fried your brains the whole day with God knows what. And those are the people that we're dependent on to pay back this 117 million and 168.4 million. And so I appeal to us, and I say us here as a parliament, let's sit down. Let's sit down and recognize that we may have a crisis emerging on our hands. And all these great things we're doing, building out our health industry, building up our infrastructure and all those things will mean nothing if we do not fix the other side. If we do not make sure that our children are growing up in a healthy and safe environment, that they do not have access to things that will destroy them. If we fail to do that, we would have betrayed everything our foreparents worked for. We would have betrayed the developmental pattern that has made Barbados one of the greatest nations on the world. Because we would have set up a society where the next generation will have no capability or capacity to maintain what we've set in place. And so I appeal to us, sir, all of us, to let us sit down, revisit, and ask ourselves, what will be the threshold for cannabis on our island? Not how many grams you can carry, but the potency that people have access to. Because that is where the danger really lies, is the potency. We look at California and all those places, but California cannot trade outside its borders. Can't move a piece outside of California because it is illegal at the federal level. And you have one of the most conservative governments leading the US right now, and I put conservative in inverted commas. That farm bill that was supposed to be renegotiated since 2018, nobody's touching that. They're not going to raise that THC level above 0.3. And so we have to determine what we're going to do here on all 166 square miles to protect our next generation. Because everybody who believes that there's somebody smoking something, but nobody knows what they're smoking. Nobody knows the potency level. They're not aware of these things. And because it says it's cannabis, they smoke it. But we're destroying ourselves. We're destroying our community. And so I want us all to sit down and look at the level of THC that we will consider legal in this country and crack down on anything out there that is above that level for the sake of our children and for the sake of our community, our society that we're building, for the economy that we're strengthening, for the infrastructure that we're building out. We must rebuild, but we must rebuild looking at the generation and what we have put in front of them and said, it is okay. And so, sir, as I said, I have no problem supporting these resolutions because these are about national development. This is what Barbados has always done. We've always sought to go one better than we were before to make sure that our people have the highest standard of living possible, the availability to the best health care possible. That's what these are about, and that's good. But let's look at the other side and ask the question, who will repay these bills? And how are we nurturing them to have the ability, not only the academic and expertise, but also the mental capacity and the productivity to repay these bills. And so with those few words, I thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Reverend Canon Dr. Rogers. Senator Reverend Morris.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to lend my support to this resolution before us. I just listened to Senator Rogers and I listened to the earmuffs type of prophecy that was pronounced here. And I prefer, sir, to take the root note of the prophet Hosea and bring a little hope, or to indicate that there's still some hope for this country. And I do so, sir, because I want to not only support this resolution, but also to say that it is my distinct privilege and profound joy to stand here today to celebrate and welcome and congratulate what I regard as a moment of history in the making. And I have to speak this way, sir, because I'm just trying to project some hope. But a moment of history in the making, and that is the entrance of an extraordinary young lady into the distinguished chamber of our Honourable Senate. Part of that history, sir, is that a young lady sits beside her former teacher in this parliament. And if that is not history, sir, well then you will certainly not find a situation where a teacher is flanked by two of his former students in the parliament of this country. Sir, the entrance of Senator Trim is not merely to mark a political milestone, but to acknowledge a journey shaped by integrity, tenacity, and commitment to public service. Today, I'm speaking because I taught her. Today, we welcome not just a new senator, but a new voice. One that carries with it the hopes of a generation, the wisdom of diligent preparation, and the spark of transformative leadership. I stand to welcome her, sir, because I believe that there's a moment for it. This is a moment for which she was prepared. I encountered her at the University of Waterford. I know you may caution me to say that there's no such institution in Barbados, but I want to say, sir, that that institution at Waterford is the foundation on which the educational ideals of this country were lodged, and it happened almost through St. Michael, sir. But I immediately recognized her talent, her leadership skill, which in my view excelled those of her contemporaries, her concern for the welfare of others, of other students, which made her the go-to girl when things seemed problematic for members of the student body. Yes, sir, there's hope. At school, she was intelligent, industrious, and a young lady in whom the most implicit confidence could be placed. For me, it was an honor to have her as my student. I believe, sir, that in an age where cynicism is too often overshadows idealism, her story reminds us of the power of conviction. She has broken barriers as I've observed her from 11 years old. And I believe, sir, that she could be a leading example for other young persons in this country. Not to follow just those of whom Senator Waters just mentioned, but I know that she walks circumspectly. And as she takes her seat in this Senate, I know that she will inspire those and represent those who today, and speak for those who will not be here. Sir, let me briefly respond to some things that we heard this morning. When I enter a debate, I do not enter that debate to win an argument. I enter that debate to get to the truth. And it's time that some of the things that are said must be examined with forensic exactitude. I've heard about the amount of borrowing and nothing to show for it. And that is not true, sir. I recall the sewers on the streets clean. I recall the buses. I recall the garbage trucks. I recall the road repairs. I recall a number of things that have happened with all the money that we have borrowed. So would you believe, I read something from Jamaica this week. Would you believe that Jamaica has just acquired new buses, sir? Do you know what those buses are? Used buses from the United States, used school buses from the United States. The buses that we have are new electric buses brought to Barbados and bought by some of the money that we are given account for today. Sir, there's no doubt now that Barbados owns the largest fleet of electric buses in the Caribbean. But these are not said. We are told about all the economy and how things are bad. Yet the experts in their analyses are saying quite opposite from what we are hearing from the opposition. In addition, sir, we are told that we had the alternative means of borrowing. But where were those alternative means of borrowing between 2013 and 2018? We should borrow on the local market. What do you mean borrow on the local market? So you mean borrow from the National Insurance Scheme, as was done, and it is in trouble? So it is, I think it is time that we speak to our issues frankly, fairly, and truthfully. But to give the impression that Barbados is doing so badly now, but was doing so good under the 10 glorious years, so it's not something that I would want to pass on to future generations. I agree with Senator Rogers. We have to look at the social impact of what is going on in our society. I know there's a view that we must have that the country is more than an economy, it is also a society. But we can have all the society that we want. But if we don't have the money to run that society, we will still be in trouble. I agree that we have to look at those whom we are paying. But like any institutions, I'm sure Senator Rogers will tell you that even if you go into an institution where you, and the problem is here in Barbados in terms of the question was asked, who is going to redeem the pension scheme, the pension scheme? Yes, we have these questions. We do have these questions. But I have hope. I have hope in this country. Because when I see people like Senator Trim enter these precincts to represent the voices of many in this country, I have hope that someday the God that I used to serve will turn things around. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Reverend Rogers. Senator Mr. Millard.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I would first like to welcome Senator Trim. I haven't listened to Senator Morris's glowing tributes. I only wish to say to Senator Trim, you must always remember that he or she who appoints you can remove you, but that should not stop you from speaking to the truth. Sir, I am pleased that as I prepare to exit medicine, the government has seen it fit. I congratulate the government for this, to invest some serious money in the polyclinics and our primary health care. There have been voices who have called for this for a long, long time. And hopefully when the government invests the money up front, we will see the results at the back end. The issues that are related to chronic non-communicable diseases and the general access to health care for those who choose or who cannot afford to have private care needed to be looked at, and the government appears, I've not heard all the details, the government appears to be making a serious effort by investing money in it. But at the end of the day, sir, the only thing that matters in healthcare, sir, it's not the money, it's the outcomes. So if you spend $58 million and nothing improves, you have wasted it. So we need to be able to come back to the people within a set time period and advise the people of what improvements we have seen in their health, sir, having spent $58 million in a 4-year period. Sir, there's no question that there needs to be, no one so far has mentioned it, the linkages electronically of the polyclinics as a network, GP's offices, and the hospital, QEH, and other hospitals. And I hope that when all has been said, the new electronic medical record that, when it's launched, will include all the polyclinics and persons' information can be available real time, and it will improve the swiftness and the quality of healthcare. But sir, there is no point having an efficient system in the polyclinic and you get to the QEH and it's a wall. And I have to say again, I hope that I can look across there in that empty chair and see my minister, but I don't see him. Sir, there's been a constant noise about the state of healthcare in this country. There'll be complaints, there'll be some explanations, some excuses, but at the end of the day, unless the people are getting what they are paying for, unless they're getting what they're paying for, they are being robbed. If I pay for something, I should get it. And if you levy a specific tax on me for something, I should have received it when I requested it. So, when I, as a surgeon, cannot operate on elective patients for 4 weeks, I have a problem. I have a problem when within my hospital, there is so much critical care traffic that it spills into the recovery room and we cannot operate and no one says anything about it to the public. I should not have to come to this parliament, sir, to say that. The area should have been bombarding you with explanations as to why it is happening. But it's not been happening. There seems to be a blackout. But we have a communication specialist in the institution. But there's no communication unless I'm deaf to it. Sir, we can spend all of the money we wish, but unless the people for whom the services are being built out are aware of them and can access them in a timely fashion, it will make no difference to their lives. And education outside of town hall meetings is critical, sir. We have not been able to keep those who do not have a voice, except on brass tacks, happy with what they're receiving. We have nice coverage in the paper about what new private facilities are opened, and lots of people attend and speak of the future, but we cannot seem to get the services that people are paying for up and running. And I'm not going to comment, sir, on oncology services, because my minister isn't here. I'm not going to comment on it. Sir, we have a brain drain. So when the government spends $58 million in infrastructure and puts in place all of the nice point-of-care machines that I heard mentioned, and an electronic medical record, who is going to run it? What are we doing about our nursing training? Are we having adequate numbers of nurses who are willing to stay and live in Barbados? Will we have to send out recruiters every year to find nurses to replace those who leave? What can we do to make the nurses happier? What can we do to improve their lot in life? Do they have to go to the United States or the UK or further afield to make a good living as professionals? And similarly for the doctors. Do our doctors want to stay? Or do they want to work in the public sector? You might stay in Barbados, but you might not work in the public sector. Sir, if we do not address some of these issues, the song by Bob Marley, and it says it was Exodus, movement of Jah people, but they're leaving they were going back. But this time they're leaving, sir. Every year, the recruiters come and nurses leave. And almost every year, we are faced with nursing shortages. And there has to be some fundamental reason why it's happening. And the people who come and work hard and give fantastic service, they don't migrate to Barbados. They're transient. They come, do their time, and they leave. And when our population, sir, increases and expands as we need to, what will we have? Will we only have care in the private sector? And I hope that there has been a comprehensive look at what manpower needs or what manpower requirements we will need when we spend large sums of money, and what difference it will make, sir, and whether some of the things that we currently do manually can be automated and have reduced need for human input. There's no question, sir, that a part of medicine has moved to the screen, and you can get Zoom consults or remote consults, but at the end of the day, people still need to be seen. And they need to know that when they are seen in the primary care setting, and you have a condition that needs to be treated in a tertiary care institution, then you can access one in a timely fashion. There's no point going to a polyclinic, having a consultation, lasts half an hour. You have to go to someplace else, and it takes you 3 days to move from the point we arrive till we get into bed. I hope that as I age, sir, and as I will inevitably need the services of my colleagues, unless there's some magical pill that we will get, that some of the issues that I came in and found as I age and reach the end of my career, I will not be leaving them behind, and all we would have done is spent money. Sir, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Miller. If there are no other speakers, please let Senator Reid.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to wrap up, but I do wish to acknowledge my colleagues and their contributions. Obviously, there was a lot of effusive praise and welcome for our new colleague, and I'm looking forward to her contributions when they come. Mr. President, I want to reference the point made by Senator Maynard, and this, in my wrap-up, is really around the idea of a magical pill. And to underscore the initial framing that I did, that the process of running the economy is not, there's no magical pills involved. It's graft, it's work, it's effort. And I wasn't certain some of the reference points made in the central bank report, but it's available online for many to see. And some of the things involved in it that were mentioned were quite contrary to what the report says. And the story is very clear that you move from a nearly 180% GDP to debt ratio to just over 100%, despite having structural reform twice and a global pandemic. You've halved the amount of interest payments you make compared to your government revenue in a period of 7 years. You've returned such levels of confidence in your economy that you are able to raise in a way that you simply weren't able to raise before. You've gone out the process of reducing the amount of imbalance that you have in the economy. You have tripled the amount of capex you spend on fiscal expenditure on capital projects. Your construction is booming, your tourism is doing well. You are not in nirvana, but you're doing solidly. And there is an ambition to do much, much more. To Senator Rogers' point, you are in the middle of deep thought around social innovation, social uplift in a moment of difficulty that we could all acknowledge. But you are a good country looking to do better. And I think that's a fundamental point. So while we may try to score political points and go all over the place, to my colleague, Senator Morris's point, the truth will always be the truth and the work will always be the work. And so I beg, Mr. President, for this resolution to now pass. I'm in your hands.
The question is that order number 8, this is a resolution to approve in accordance with the provisions of the Special Loans Act, Chapter 105, the borrowing of approximately $170 million from the Saudi Fund for Development, in this case, for the clinic upgrade, refurbishment of primary healthcare system, Phase 1. This resolution will not pass. All those honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. The nays, the ayes have it. This resolution is now passed.
Mr. President, order number 9, in the name of the Honourable Minister of Innovation, Industry, Science and Technology, to move the passing of a resolution to approve in accordance with the provisions of the Special Loans Act, Cap 105, the borrowing by the Government of Barbados of the sum of approximately $68.4 million Barbados dollars from the Saudi Fund for Development on the terms and conditions contained in the loan agreement, the main provisions of which are set out in the schedule, and the proceeds of which will be used to finance the urban renewal project in the water, housing, and infrastructure sectors, Phase 1.
Senator Reid.
Mr. President, I rise to beg that order number 9 now be passed as a resolution.
The question is that order number 9, a resolution to approve in accordance with the provisions of the Special Loans Act, Chapter 105, the borrowing of some $68.4 million from the Saudi Fund for Development. In this particular order is in relation to financing an urban renewal project in water, housing, and infrastructure sectors. So the question is that this resolution will not pass. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The things the ayes have it, this resolution is now passed. Senator Dr. Chantal Monroe-Knight.
Mr. President, I'd like to move that the sitting be now suspended for lunch until 3 p.m.
The question is that this sitting of the Honourable Senate be suspended until 3 p.m. Sorry? We just Senator Monroe-Knight.
Thank you, Mr. President. Noting that we will have some committee meetings over the luncheon period, I beg to move that the sitting be suspended until 3:15.
The question is that this sitting of the Senate be suspended until 3:15 p.m. today. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The things the ayes have it. The members of the Committee of Selection are reminded of a meeting during the luncheon period today. Sitting is now suspended until 3:15 p.m. today.